30% of businesses living paycheck to paycheck, not because you're not making money, but because you're not prioritizing profit. Like I said, I was really about 10 years in practice before. And the good news is that I really looked at this in 2019, coming into our 10-year anniversary of our practice, because, which is our physical brick and mortar, because I remember in 2019 just being at a really low place where I was like, shit, we're making great money, but where is it going? And I started, and I'm going to give so much credit to this system. I am not a coach for them. I don't have any association with them other than I'm very passionate about what they teach, which is there is a man named Mike Michalowicz. He's an awesome, awesome speaker. I have not heard him live, but I've been on a bunch of webinars with him. And he wrote a book called Profit First. And someone, I don't know who, I think I heard about it on another podcast. And I picked up this book and it became my Bible. And I started in 2019. Thank freaking Lord, because I probably have to give him this testimonial, to be completely honest. I started with that in 2019. And when March 2020 hit and COVID shut us down, those habits, and I started with just a few of the habits. I could not at that time manage implementing all of the habits at once. And the reason that I started small was I needed that exercise to start small. And that's exactly what I'm going to teach today, in terms of getting you paid and then making profit a priority. Because here's what started to happen is that what I started was just creating the habits that led me to have not be going from it comes into our merchant account and it all starts to have a home instead of just flying by the seat of my pants and just being like, okay, this month, this is how much I'm going to have in payroll. So I'll put this, that will just come out of the same account. When I first started Profit First, I had one bank account and that was my operating expenses. Because I was like, okay, I was under the old impression, the old shitty story that sales minus expenses equaled profit, which is super antiquated and what Profit First reverses you to think. And how they teach it is profit minus expenses equals what you have to work with, what you have to pay out. And the profit in their capacity means the profitability of the business, but also paying the business owner first. And I'm going to expand a little bit about that. There is some little deviations I do that I teach with all my working moms, but I just wanted to dive in there and just clarify that and just make sure I gave credit where credit is due to Profit First method, because that's how I started. And it was literally the one thing that helped me survive 2020. Because here in 2020, I had like I said, a brick and mortar business. I had multiple employees that relied on their paychecks. I did not have to make any of them collect unemployment. Even though that we made some hybrid rules and, um, like for like their jobs and that sort of thing, even though we are a brick and mortar physical practice where we actually have hands-on people as a chiropractic and lab work office. And it was such a confusing time, but the huge thing that we got out of it was, like I said, if I had not implemented this in 2019, some of these systems that I'm about to talk about, we would really have not been in that boat. I would have had to lay people off. I would have had to possibly close one of our practices. We had multiple at the time. So you can imagine the stress levels when you have, at that point, I think our overhead was about $100,000 a month, between both practices. And you can imagine what that felt like if I didn't have some sort of cushion for that I'm about to share with you. So your first account, when you want to start to make once that cash is collected, to make that money work for you, is got to be 100% what I call your profit account. And this is going to be the account that you are going to move over. And when I'm working in my group, I get very specific about how I do this. But for the sake of this episode, just to give you kind of, like I said, a glimpse into what it's like in the group coaching program, I talk about your profit account first because it is the one that, like, I find is like there are so many people that have skipped their own paycheck to cover payroll of other people, or made made paying off a debt more of a priority than themselves. Um, if you pushed off paying yourself until next month, but next month actually never really came, this next part is going to have help you start to shift that mindset. Because it, like I said at the beginning, is a mindset. We're going to talk about how to structure your account so you get paid first, and this profit account is the first one. At the beginning, profit does mean like what you actually take home and also what's left over in the business. But then I get more strategic. But for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to teach profit as an interchangeable payment term and profitability of the business. Um, but the goal of this is to really set up these accounts so you set up a back end like the boss you can be, and your business doesn't just make money because let's face it, that's actually the easiest part is the making money. It keeps it and you learn how to strategically use it to expand your business rather than contract. I love that saying here is that like a mind once expanded can never go back to its contract to its original size, right? So this is you starting to exercise that muscle of like making profit a priority. And the second thing is that you have an operating account. Now, like I said, when I started, I just had an operating account. Every single thing we had for cash went into this one account. And the goal of a system like this is to teach each part of your money to know where it has its own individual home, and it gets sent to its home on a very consistent, hopefully one day automatic basis. And the second account is going to be your operating expenses, which is profit minus operating equals what you have to actually live on. So this is really critical in terms of your business. So, the first step, though, I really also have to give a little bit of love here is setting up being very clear with how your entities are set up. Because how your entity, meaning the structure of your actual business, are you a single proprietor, a sole proprietor? Are you a single member LLC? Are you a multi-member LLC? Are you an S corp? Are you a C corp? Those are the five primary setups. Really has a huge influence on how you pay yourself. And while I am not an CPA nor an expert or an attorney on setting up your entities, this is where I caution and tell everyone that the best thing that you can do is get really educated on how you are currently set up and when you need to get set up as a different tax entity, whether it's doing a tax election, an S corp election, or that sort of thing. And these are questions you do want to ask your own accountant, and or if you work with a tax strategy company, you should have them review for you. I just went through this with a tax strategy company I'm starting to work with. And they reviewed all my entities that they were set up. We did find one thing that needed to be corrected. And that's with multiple entities. So just really starting to dig deep a little bit here, and start with that as your foundation is like figuring out how do you pay yourself based on the entity you have. And I'm actually going to have one of the tax strategy people I work with on just to talk about this topic because it is something that is usually so dry and so boring, but is extremely valuable for you to know. And the next part is going to be once you know what entity and how you actually pay yourself legally, um, we need to figure out how do we get paid. So, like I said, the two essential accounts, the basics, this is step number one. This is what I started with in 2019 is you have the operating and then you have the profit account. Now, here's what I recommend and what I did. Again, this is not the classical profit first method. I'm not really going to get into that. I encourage you to read that book. It's amazing. And they also have a great podcast with it. Um, is that operating account is where all of your money comes into. And then it's your job to start to set up these transfers that we're going to talk about a little bit. But I'm not going to give you the percentages and stuff like that because, like I said, that's very specific to your business. And does I highly encourage you to read the Profit First book if you want to get into this. I'm going to give you kind of like a much more Cliff Notes version of what I do with and work with my clients on. And that is, like I said, operating account. And your operating account is one job. It's going to cover expenses and the day-to-day business activity. Um, and then the profit account is where you take money from your operating account. So let's say you brought in $1,000 and you're going to transfer. Let's say your percentage that you target for is 10%. You want 10% profit and or 10% payment to you. Again, based on how your entity is set up, you're going to transfer if your target percentage is 10%, you're going to transfer $100 to your profit account. So you collected that $1,000 that came into your operating account, and now that $100, that 10% is going into your profit account. And you can manually do this, and or you can set it up where if you know certain amount of money is coming in, where you set up auto transfers. The goal here, though, the huge thing is to just build the habit. That is the huge part here. And then the second thing is these are just like what I call the two core accounts. Um, and the profit percentage that goes into your profit account, that is, again, you're always setting targets for that. You obviously want it to increase, but you can start really small. I have some women business owners that they start at 1%. So if they made $100, they transferred $10. And like I said, $10 doesn't sound like a lot, but if you put it in that profit account and it's also how you're going to pay yourself, then you can let it ride, just like I talked about with the podcast before, and or you can, pay it out to yourself if you need to. The goal is really just to get the habit so you start building some momentum in how good that feels. You get that dopamine hit of like, hey, I made money today, even if it's definitely not the amount that you want to be making at the beginning. So, how do we build that back end once we have those two basics covered? So, once you have those two basic accounts, operating profit set up, I want you to, these are what I call your three growth accounts. Now, there are more accounts than these that I'm going to talk about, but these three are going to be your basics. These are the ones that saved my ass in 2020. And these are the ones that will start to give you that cushion and again, build that habit of you actually building this out. So, the third account that I recommend that you open after profit and operating expenses is going to be a payroll account. Now, and this will be coming up in one of our series too, is this is also so you can hire without anxiety and not dip into your personal savings. So when payroll account is huge because as you start to grow your business, you're going to start to want to hire people. There are some people that need hires from day one. That's more often not the case. Usually the owner is the operator and the hustler at the beginning for at least the initial phase of the build out until they can start to scale things outside of themselves. But you want to start setting up a payroll account because what's going to happen is that this is also, if you are the first employee, let's say you get paid as a W-2, this is also, I take this out of the operating expenses. So you're starting to build a habit of like, hey, if I'm paid as a W-2 and I'm on salary, I know every 2 weeks I'm going to get paid this amount. I want that coming out of a separate account. So I build the habit of moving money aside that is set for payroll. That way I always know I have 1 to 2 payrolls covered because again, shit happens and people are relying on you to pay their rent or their mortgage. And it never should be that you're borrowing to cover payroll. Sometimes at the beginning, that is a reality for some people, but this is starting to build that habit of that doesn't have to be a reality for you. So like I said, you can hire without anxiety. We are in the process where we know we're probably going to be hiring another doctor, adding another doctor within our next year to our practice. So we started bumping up our payroll amount. So we have the base payroll. We know around where we fall every 2 weeks. And then what we know is that on top of that, we are going to start putting some money in for a new hire, because we know that it's going to take them a while for them to start to be able to pay for themselves. So we like to get a cushion. We've learned this the hard way, after several hires, of like what that cushion needs to be for us not to have to kind of dip into our other operating overhead on a monthly basis, be able to expand our business. So that's what payroll is for. It's a peace of mind that you can cover payroll, and also peace of mind for the future when you're ready to do a new hire. The next account, your tax account. Your tax account is saying goodbye to tax season dread, because this is the number, other than paying yourselves first. This is probably the second biggest problem I see most entrepreneurs have, is that they are paying last year's tax bill with this year's revenue. And so this is a way, again, lear- totally from the school of hard knocks for me, that that's a story for another day in terms of getting audited by the IRS. But this is peace of mind is a vibe here, right? Like, so putting aside consistent money that you know you're going to owe in taxes. And then this is where I say the flip side is that when you start to get good at tax strategy and you start to have some money to pay people to help you do really good tax strategy, um, this account is where money sits that you pay if you pay quarterly payments, so that you have peace of mind that your tax bill is covered with revenue that actually has been allocated to it, has a home, instead of, like I said, either borrowing and or catching up with this year's revenue for last year's tax bill. And then the fifth account, again, these are the core accounts, the five core accounts, is going to be the vault. And the vault is, this is your emergency and your investment for the future fund. Think surprise expenses or future upgrades, investment in yourself, maybe in coaching. Maybe it's a new marketing system that you actually need to purchase before it has like operating expenses that would go out of your operating account. And maybe it's a piece of equipment. Maybe you need to buy a new machine for your office, or a new product that will help you add a stream of revenue. So, and it has an upfront investment. So that is why I call it the vault. In a perfect world, the vault, in terms of emergency and investment, could be separated. But I find that, like I said, the simpler you make it, the better. I have it down to these five accounts. It makes it a lot easier to do that. And then there are a couple bonus ones, but like I said, if you really want to get that information on the bonus accounts, what I would recommend is you read Profit First for the exact way that they do it. Um, and I hope this is really, really helpful, because you want to make sure that setting this up is going to make sure every dollar has a home before it hits your bank account. And it also is a power move, I like to say, is really starting to automate this into transfers that happen either weekly or bi-weekly, and or a system where you do it at a consistent time, because you don't rise by remembering. You rise by implementing systems that allow you to do so. So I hope that this is super helpful for you. Um, please, share this information with anybody that you think might really benefit from it. I am so excited to get some feedback on this episode, because this is really where the rubber meets the road. It is something that, like I said, saved my ass in 2020. Hopefully, it will not only help save your ass one day, but it also will help you scale and grow your business, so that you don't have to fall into one of those statistics, that are living still 30% of businesses living paycheck to paycheck, not because you're not making money, but because you're not prioritizing profit. Thank you so much for joining me today on Moms Making Dough, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts. And as always, please rate, review, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.